The autumn wind carried the crisp smell of pine and the faint promise of snow as Caleb Dawson guided his horse down the narrow trail towards Silver Creek. He hadn't set foot in that small mining town for nearly 3 months, and truth be told, he would. Be there now, if not for the empty shelves in his cabin. Salt, flour, coffee, the simple things even a man who lived alone in the mountains could go without. At 42, Caleb was a man built of hard years and heavier memories. His once black beard was streaked with silver, his shoulders broad beneath a worn buckskin jacket, and his hands bore the scars of years spent trapping and carving a life out of the wilderness. Those who had known him before Sarah's death 6 winters back said he had aged 10 years in that one. Folks in Silver Creek had long since forgotten what a smile looked like. As he rode into town, the buildings huddled close together, their rough, hewn timbers leaning against the mountain wind as though for protection. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the ringing of a blacksmith. As hammer echoed across the valley, Caleb tugged his hat lower, hoping to buy his supplies without talk or company. But before he reached the general store, the sound of raised voices pulled his attention to the town square. A crowd of men gathered tight around a makeshift platform. Caleb urged his horse forward, intending to pass by, but his mount slowed on its own, sensing its rider. Hesitation. "Come on now, gentlemen." A sharp voice rang out. "Surely one of you needs a woman about the house. She strong as an ox, and twice as useful." Caleb frowned, recognizing Richard Harlow, a cattle trader known for his sharp dealings. But today, instead of horses, he stood on planks, balanced across 2 barrels, and beside him, a figure stood bound, motionless, and hooded by a rough grain sack. "She ain't much to look at," Harlow jeered, his laugh as brittle as breaking glass. "But she'll work hard. Can promise she's pleasant company, but that'll be for you to manage." Uneasy chuckles rolled through the crowd. A few women watching from the edges pulled their shawls tighter and turned away, shame and disgust written plain on their faces. "What is her story?" a man called out. Harlow spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Let us just say she was promised before. Fella who had her decided she wants worth the bother. Too wild, too peculiar. One man is trash, as they say." The figure under the sack straightened. At those words, her shoulders squaring despite the humiliation. That small defiance caught Caleb's eye and held it. $5, someone shouted, half mocking. "5. Harlow barked. "You insult me, sir. She's worth more than that. Might be homely as a fence post, but she's strong and knows her letters." "Then take the sack off," another man called. "Let's see what we're buying." "No," Harlow said quickly, his smile tight. "Terms of the sale. Previous owner insisted better for everyone this way. Trust me, she ain't for her looks." A ripple of cruel laughter followed. Caleb's jaw tightened. He had seen cruelty before, but this selling a woman like cattle, keeping her hidden, like some shameful secret, stirred something deep and bitter inside him. 3, a man offered. 2, another countered, smirking. The woman's hands clenched into fists. Even from where he sat on his horse, Caleb could see the whiteness of her knuckles. "Gentlemen, please," Harlow snapped, frustration leaking through his smooth tone. "She's worth more. Knows her Bible. Can cook, keep house, everything a man could want. This ain't right, Harlow, and you know it." Daniel Foster, the blacksmith, said firmly from the edge of the crowd. "Right or wrong ain't my business," Harlow shot back. "I've got papers to prove this sale. Now, do I hear any serious offers, or do I haul her to the next town?" The crowd shifted uneasily. Men who had laughed moments ago now studied their boots. The woman swayed where she stood, displayed like goods in a window. "Going once," Harlow called. "Going twice. $10. The words were out of Caleb's mouth before he realized he spoke. The crowd turned. Startled Caleb Dawson, who spoke to no one and lived alone high in the mountains, had bid. Harlow's eyes lit up with greedy relief. "10 for Mr. Dawson. Do I hear 15? Silent. No one dared raise the price against him. "Sold." Harlow slammed his fist into his palm. "To Caleb Dawson." Caleb swung down from his horse, his movements deliberate, heavy with unspoken warning. He counted out the money, almost all he brought for his supplies, and climbed the platform steps. Up close, the woman stood nearly his own height, her posture proud despite the sack hiding her face. "The papers," Caleb said quietly. Harlow handed over the document with relief. "She is all yours. Good luck. You'll need it." Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice. Word of advice, keep the sack on till you are out of town. Trust me. Caleb ignored him. He turned to the woman. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Can you ride?" She gave a small nod. "My horse is just there. We'll leave now." He reached for her elbow, but she pulled back, thrusting her bound hands toward him instead. Her message was clear: free me first. Caleb respected that. He untied the rope, wincing at the raw marks it had left on her wrists. Then together they descended from the platform. The crowd parted, whispers chasing them like cold wind. Caleb lifted her onto his horse and swung up behind her, his arms steady on the reins. She sat stiff and silent, the sack still covering her face. As they rode out of Silver Creek, Harlow called after them, his voice ringing through the gathering dusk. "Remember Dawson." No returns. She's your problem now. The words followed them up the mountain trail like circling buzzards, but with every mile that passed, the woman's shoulders eased just a little. It was only when the last lights of town faded into darkness that she spoke, her voice muffled by the sack but steady. "Why?" Caleb guided the horse along the rocky trail, considering his answer. "Did it seem right?" he said at last. "Nobody deserves what they did back there." There was silence for a long time. Then, soft as a breath, she whispered, "Thank you." The wind rose, carrying the lonely cry of a wolf across the valley. The woman didn't flinch. If anything, she seemed calmer now, as though the wilderness was less frightening than the people she'd left behind. Caleb found himself wondering what story the sack hid. What kind of face would make men sell a woman like livestock? He didn't know, but he would, and something deep inside told him that whatever he found beneath that sack, his life would never be the same again. The trail wound upward into the pines, the moon rising pale and watchful above the jagged ridges. Caleb did speak much. Words were never his gift. But the woman sat rigid in front of him, her silence heavier than stone. By the time they reached his cabin, a sturdy structure of hand-hewn logs tucked against the trees, night had fallen fully. He helped her down, then tied the horse, his mind already on firewood and stew. Inside, the single-room cabin smelled of smoke, leather, and pine resin. Caleb lit a lantern, its warm glow softening the rough-hewn beams. "You can sit," he said gruffly, gesturing to the chair by the hearth. She obeyed, her back straight despite clear exhaustion. The burlap sack still covered her head. Caleb hesitated, then reached out. Time this came off. She flinched at his hand, then stilled. Slowly, carefully, he untied the rough cord and lifted the sack away. Beneath it was a face he did not expect, not ugly, not twisted, not monstrous. Instead, she had auburn hair, tangled but striking, and green eyes that held both defiance and sorrow. Her cheek bore a fading bruise, and her lips were cracked from thirst. For a moment, Caleb only looked at her, and she, in turn, studied him with the wary focus of a wild animal. "They lied," he muttered. Her mouth quirked bitterly. "Of course they did." Caleb set the sack aside. "You're free here. No one'll touch you." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You bought me." "I bought your freedom," he corrected. His tone was firm, almost sharp. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the pop of the fire. At last she said, "My name is Anna. Caleb Dawson." He nodded once. "You're welcome here as long as you want." Growing bond days turned into weeks. Anna mended clothes, chopped vegetables, even mended one of his traps with surprising skill. Caleb gave her space, but slowly, words began to pass between them. She told him pieces of her story, how she had been promised to a man who treated her as property, how she'd refused him, and how her family had turned their backs when the scandal spread. Harlow had taken advantage, binding her into false papers of servitude. Caleb listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was with quiet certainty. "You don't owe anyone an apology," he said one night as snowflakes dusted the cabin window. She looked at him then, long and searching, as though weighing the truth of his words. The Marshallese visit by early spring, news of the auction had spread. One morning, a knock thundered against the cabin door. Caleb opened it to find Daniel Foster, the blacksmith who had spoken against Harlow, now wearing a deputy's badge under the authority of the county marshal. "Dawson," Foster said, his tone respectful. "I came to check on her." Anna stood behind Caleb, no sack on her head, no chains on her wrists. Foster's expression softened. "You all right, ma'am?" She nodded. "Better than I've been in a long time." Foster shifted uncomfortably. "Law, a gray thing here. Harlow had papers, but if you're willing, Anna, we can put this right, make it so nobody can claim you again. How? She asked. Marriage, Foster said simply. Voluntary, to Caleb, if he'll have you. It declose every loophole. The words landed heavy. Anna, as breath caught. Caleb looked at her, not the lawman, his voice steady. Choice is yours. I want to force it. Anna studied him, firelight glinting in her green eyes. For the first time she smiled, small but real. I'll marry you, Caleb Dawson. Trouble returns. Ethan Harlow, the piece did last. Word of Anna's new life spread quick through Silver Creek, and with it came danger. One gray morning, Caleb spotted riders on the ridge. By sundown, Ethan Harlow, Richard Harlow's hot-blooded nephew, came storming into town with 3 men at his back. His voice carried across Main Street like a whip crack. That Dawson bastard stole our property. Ethan shouted, his hand already on the butt of his revolver, and I'll have her back, or I'll have blood. The townsfolk scattered, pulling children indoors, shutting windows, but Daniel Foster stepped into the street, his deputy's badge gleaming. She is no one's property, Ethan. She is a married woman now, Mrs. Anna Dawson. Ethan's face twisted with rage. Paper Don, change what she is. That girl belongs to us. From the boardwalk outside the general store, Caleb. His boots thudded heavy as he stepped forward. Anna was nowhere in sight. He told her to stay at the cabin, hidden. You talk too much, boy, Caleb said, his voice calm as winter. If you want to fight, I am right here. The showdown, the silence that followed, was thick, broken only by the creak of saddles and the distant cry of a crow. Ethan's hand twitched at his side. Caleb's gaze never wavered. Draw, Ethan spat, yanking his revolver. 2 gunshots cracked as one. The echo thundered off the false front buildings. For a moment no one moved. Then Ethan staggered, clutching his shoulder, his pistol clattering to the dust. Caleb lowered his Colt, smoke curling from the barrel. His face was carved from stone. You get one chance, he said, his voice low but carrying. Lave Silver Creek, don't come back. Ethan cursed, his pride bleeding more than the wound. His men dragged him up, muttering that it wasn't worth dying here. Within minutes, their hoofbeats faded into the hills. The street exhaled. Doors creaked open, townsfolk stepping out with cautious relief. Foster clapped Caleb's shoulder. You saved us a heap of trouble, Dawson. Law'll catch up with them soon enough. But you, he looked Caleb square in the eye, you gave this town a line it needed. When Caleb returned to the cabin that evening, Anna met him at the door. She searched his face, her hands trembling until she saw he was unhurt. They were gone, he said simply. Her shoulders sagged with relief, tears welling as she stepped into his arms. For the first time, Caleb held her without hesitation, his heart cracking open like spring ice. Days turned to weeks, then months. Together, they worked the land, Anna planting a small garden, Caleb repairing fences, their laughter slowly warming the cabin walls. The wilderness no longer felt empty. Years later, folks in Silver Creek would still whisper about that day when Caleb Dawson stood in the street against Ethan Harlow. But what mattered more was what followed. A woman once unwanted, finding love where she least expected. A man once broken, finding life again in the quiet strength of her presence. And together, they built something neither had dared hope for. A home, a family, and a peace the mountains themselves seemed to bless. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us which part you found the most thrilling. Your feedback means a lot.